Back to Hoi 4, Equestria War, the Ascendancy under Hiram Zernid. And in today's episode, we're going to be continuing down this really cool thing, and, well, and hiring an operative, it seems. That too, I suppose. I suppose we are doing that as well. Sure. The perfect ruler is me! Good. Stay in a stalemate. That's what I want you guys to do. Just nobody win. The philosopher princes of equinity. It is the right and responsibility of the equines of gold to oversee that justice is done in the ascendancy. A new legal system will be crafted to reflect the new social order, one far more just than the courts of old. Its orders will be harsh but fair, and the decrees of the princes of justice will be unquestionable. Woo! Yay! Yeah! So I have to ask, why the hollow shades? The guide started, Starry Glory's voice cutting abruptly through the quiet of night. The two had been walking in what she had assumed to be amicable silence, though from the fidgeting of her companion she could tell that her comfort had been one-sided. What do you mean? I mean, it's not like pear sprites are all that hard to find. I was wondering why we came here, since the hollow shades are a bit out of the way. The guide shrugged. It was close to Bales, and there was a confirmed infestation not too long ago, she answered after a moment at the Thrustrel's expected look. Mere happenstance, I assure you. Why the curiosity? Starry Glory's face was unreadable. I was wondering if it had to do with anything with the Pony of Shadows. I cannot say I'm familiar with the title, the guide admitted. Not a title so much of a mantle or a name. Starry Glory started, struggling to find the words. He is, well, rather an avatar of the Lady of the Nightmare. He was powerful, holding a shard of the princess's power. He was able to hold his own against the assembled pillars of harmony. He was the avatar of her might, and he gave it up. And all for what? Friendship? The guide stood silently, taken aback by the normally gentile pony's sudden outburst. She felt like she could feel the same, but a persistent feeling in the back of her head, a distant sensation wondering, a speck of blue in the corner of her eye caught her attention. The guide quickly scooped up the pear sprites and put it into a bottle, but the distant feeling never went away. Obtained ingredient crushed pear sprites to be used in the economical super projects. Nice. Now let's go to Stalingrad. Oh boy. Although Equus is indeed a continent of equinity, it has not managed to evade the influence of Zalmair. A griffin colony lies on the continent's northeast, and just south of them lies the red land of Stalingrad, completely and utterly completed by Zalmair's. Actually, that kind of helps them prove their theories, because, well, there's the griffins, and there's the communist ponies, being corrupted by Zalmair's influence of the griffins right beside them. Of course, the ones that got corrupted are the ones right beside the griffins. Duh. It's very anecdotal. But if you're trying to figure out a way to prove yourself, there's one help. But the project requires me to venture deep into this land of woe. From the books and tomes that I've studied in the city of Bales, I've come to know of a mysterious object of interest by the local cult, the Dust of Starfall. I'm intrigued to see what happens in this endeavor. Same. I'm very intrigued by what's going to happen in all the endeavors. Oh, the Great War has begun. Well, I'm glad I went around and gathered the stuff over there already, because I like to get out of that war-torn nation and head over to Stalingrad. Good timing. Socialist Republic of Scandinavia is dead. Whatever. Who cares about them? No one does. And if you say you do, you're a horrible being because, you know, they're a Griffin nation, and you should not care about a Griffin nation, of course. Free passage through a red land. When the guide had first passed the border separating Equestria and Stalingrad, she had expected to feel something. Stalingrad was the greatest stronghold of crypto-avian Marxism on Equus, if not the world. Zalmar's influence should have been invested heavily here, yet the guide could sense nothing. Perhaps the influence of the great enemy was more subtle than she anticipated. Nevertheless, the guide, alongside Starry Glory and the rest of her entourage, have been traveling north along the coastline for about a week. They had been trotting in the direction of a small village that had been mentioned several times in the tomes from the Bales. When they finally arrived, they had managed to speak to one of the braver ponies residing there, a mare who introduced herself as Salty Breeze. "Yes, I know what it is that you are seeking," she said, speaking in between stalk of barley. The guide had been hailed by the mare when they were a small ways away from outside the village, curious as to why such a motley crew had come so far into the middle of nowhere. When they had mentioned what they were after, her cheerful expression had grown somber. It was a little over 3 months ago. Some of the local boys were out fishing, and they heard a big boom. Something struck in a small island nearby, just a few miles off the coast there, and a tidal wave from the impact knocked their skiff over. 2 of them, they didn't make it back, she said. The mare hung her head low, giving a small sigh. The rest of the boys say the island's different now. Cursed. They have also seen some strange boats around the area. As this, a look of genuine concern entered the pony's face. If you all are going out there, you must be careful, yes? No telling what might happen. The guide was shocked at the level of compassion that Salty Breeze had shown them. This was some pony who had willingly given themselves over to the enemy. She shook her head. It wasn't important. They had their destination, and that was all that matters. We'll be careful. Alright, I'm assuming, I thought that we weren't done with this event chain. The Tainted Isle. The island lay completely still. Gone was the song of crickets that had been ever present on the mainland. The whisper of the wind through the trees was absent, replaced only by the last gasp of a dying mare. Even the sound of crashing of the waves grew silent as the party drew their anchors and landed on the island shore. And all that remained was the sound of soft breathing and the beating of the guide's heart. It grew obvious to the guide that a great magical calamity had fallen upon this tiny islet, likely during the starfall that had brought them here. The land itself had seemed to take on an alien appearance. The grass lay flat on the ground, each blade seemingly to point away from the epicenter of the fall. The trees grew at unusual angles, the branches forming fractal patterns on the trunks that they sprang from. The guide could see no signs of any wildlife. There were no tracks, no droppings, not even a leaf out of place. "Well, this is suitably ominous," Starry Glory quipped, a smirk on his face. "Quite," the guide snapped. "We do not have time for foolishness. The sooner that we get to the dust of Starfall, the sooner we can leave." Ordering 2 of her equines of silver to remain behind to guard the ship, she took the rest of the party towards the center of the island. The closer that the party got to the center, however... Darn it, hair. Deep water. Seemed to wander, and any pony who left sight of the main group often found themselves away from where they thought they were. The grass began to shimmer in the night sky, and the water collecting in the pools took on magical hues, inviting those who looked to peer closer into their depths. Eventually, the guide and her party reached the center of the island. The fallen star lay in a large crater, glowing faintly in the stillness of the night. Starry stepped forwards, but the guide lay her hoof across her chest, her eyes widening. An Ursa Major lay sleeping around the star. Ooh, now that's dangerous. The fallen star. Wait, Ursa Major? Oh, God. I mean, Urza Minors are huge. And Urza Majors are supposed to be way bigger. Like in the show, My Little Pony, you see an Urza Minor, and it is humongous. And they all think it's Urza Major. This is Urza Major? Okay. Now that is a problem, Starry Glory whispered, staring at the Urza Major that lay sleeping below. He glanced to the guide. So, what do you think? Do you have any voodoo magic to take that thing down? The guide grimaced. My potions may be powerful, but they're certainly not enough to take down an Urza Major. No, the best thing to do is to sneak around and collect the dust of Starfall without waking the beast. She hummed, thinking for a moment, and turned fully to the Thrushell standing beside her. I need you to fly down there. What? Starry yelped. He gulped, glancing back to the Urza Major, still sleeping, thankfully, and continued in a mere quiet tone. Are you crazy? I can't carry you down there. You're too heavy. The guide gave him a look, and the Thrushell looked away, stammering, why don't I just fly down there and grab it myself? You don't know what to get, the guide said. Unspoken was the assertion that she simply didn't trust him. It has to be me. Grimacing, the Thrushell grabbed the guide under her hooves, and the guide pretended to ignore the comments about her weight. The two flew into the pit, hovering over the rock, and the guide collected a few motes of dust emanating from the rear. Silently, she held the flask up to the Thrushell, who took it as a cue to leave. As he began to fly away, however, a strong wind blew through the pit, and the Thrushell lost his grip, dropping the guide onto the head of the gargantuan monster. Tumbling off the beast's snout, the guide impacted the ground with a huff. Holding her breath, she could only watch as the great beast's eyes slowly opened, staring directly at her. Run! She whispered. She shot to her hooves and scrambled out of the pit as quickly as her hooves would take her. Run! Run! She shouted to the assembled equines, not caring if they followed her or not. She glanced behind her as the creature stood at her full height, blotting out the moon. Roar! It let out a roar that shook the foundations of the very earth. The guide turned back. Racing down to where the ship had docked, she saw that the two zebras she had left behind had already begun to weigh the anchor and was pulling out slowly. She took a running leap onto the boat and promptly collapsed, breathing heavily at the exertion. Starry Glory landed next to her, and she turned to him. Next time, you can get the damn dust. Obtained ingredient, dust of Starfall, to be used in the alchemical super projects. We're not done yet. I expected that to be done with that event chain because, I kind of, got an item. Oh, Ponyville and its surroundings. Oh, that's what it is. I have to go to Ponyville now. Got it. In search, Ponyville. I've heard so much about this place, mostly of it being a nexus of friendship, and that this is where the so-called element bearers come from. Bah, ponies and their magic. I don't know what could be so special about a humble, rural, countryside town. In any case, it seems like a nice and calm place for me to formulate our next move. I'll write about this place later. The guidance makes me feel like this place is something special about it, after all. Alright. In court of an equine gold. O judge, the convicted standing before you is guilty of theft. How shall he die? The equine of gold looked down from his bench at the zebra standing before him. Shackles bound the convict's legs together, and a bridle had been fitted so tight to the zebra's muscle that he could not open his mouth to speak for himself. There was fear in his eyes, raw and palpable. Every zebra knew that since the equine of gold had taken up residence in Nairus as his supreme judge, the Ascendancy's brutal law had begun to strangle crime in the region, often by strangling the criminals who committed them. The judge looked down at his notes, then back to the convict before him. He was a small zebra, and the judge realized he was looking at a colt, and a scrawny and starving one at that. How old is the convict, he asked. 14, your supreme honor, the bailiff answered, but he is a criminal, and the punishment for theft is death. I asked only for his age, the judge answered, and the bailiff shrunk back at the reprimand of an equine of gold. But you are correct. The punishment for theft is death. However, this poor colt is starving. He stole bread only to feed himself. That is a failing on the part of the regional authorities for failing to provide for the equines they are responsible for. The crime is not alone to bear. Then he looked at the convict. His fear had mixed with surprise and confusion. "With which hoof did you steal the bread from the baker?" he asked him, and when after a moment the convict slightly raised his right foreleg as hard as the chains would let him, the equine of gold nodded and stood up to pass judgment. "In recognition of the unfortunate circumstances that brought you before me, I, in the name of the Ascendancy, grant you mercy of your life. But theft is a serious crime. You would taint the Godhead, should you not be purged of your sin." He turned to the bailiff. "Remove his right foreleg, and release him then. He will be cleansed of his guilt. Then bring me the mayor, as he shares in the crime, so he shall too share in the punishment. The word of law must be followed for the safety of our society." Guess you at least got to live. Woo! That's our nation. It is important for the mothers and fathers of today to impress upon their youth what is important in our society. It should be a blessing that those parents with children gifted enough to be considered equines of gold should say goodbye, as their rightful place as leaders benefit us all. Woo, yeah! I'm just slowly building up every province in the nation right now. Welcome to Ponyville. Starry Glory had left her some time ago, muttering something about the snooty ponies living there. The threshold said his goodbyes and left the guide with her silver equine guards, letting her make her own way to the admittedly unremarkable village. It was small by equestrian standards, with only the notable attraction being an impressive tree-shaped crystalline castle. Hawkers patted their wares along the main thoroughfare, with ponies selling everything from apples and apple products to fine clothing. The peddlers' cries died slightly as they caught sight of the ecstatic procession of zebras before them, thinly disguised anxiety writ plain on their faces. But many quickly found their courage, the apple vendors in particular even approaching the guide directly. Here you go, miss," a young filly cried, hoofing the guide a deep red apple. "Once you try this, you'll never want an apple from another orchard again." With the ice broken, other merchants came up to the group, proffering samples of their merchandise to the guide and her guards, their generosity disregarding the differences of status. The merchants seemed to be trying to outdo each other in terms of their offerings, each trying to be the first to get the group to spend their bits. Finding herself quickly covered in an ever-growing pile of silks, candles, and flowers, the guide glanced around for an avenue of escape. She spotted a darker alleyway, and with a hurried, "This way! This way!" she threw an alchemical smoke bomb against the ground. With a tingling of glass, a thick cloud of smoke covered the still-growing crowd. The guide managed to push her way past the now coughing ponies that surrounded her on all sides. Sprinting through the alleyway, the guide felt the guidance direct her towards an inn. Utterly exhausted from her ordeal, she made her way over. Nothing like a Ponyville welcome. Yeah, that's Ponyville. A breakthrough. For the first time in these days, the guidance directed her. The guide had been laying low, in part due to the fears of getting involved in another incident. But in truth, it was as much because she simply didn't know what to do next. She had sent a few of the equines of silver to ask around and gather information, but few of the ponies knew enough about alchemy to know what might be considered a useful region. It was infuriating, but she had little choice other than to sit and rest. But the time for rest seemed to be over now. The guidance had pulled her quite insistently a little ways out of town, to what almost appeared to be some kind of path leading through a lightly forested woodlands. The guidance was almost painful now, and the guide was panting as she tried to get to where she was so urgently needed. She came to the rest of the clearing, the guidance pointing her to a small, fluffy creature sitting peacefully in the middle. A rabbit of some kind? No, she realized, a jackalope. Of course, the horns would make for the perfect balancing agent to make her more unstable potions. Creeping forward, she drew her knife, walking silently with a hoof raised to strike. The crack of a twig caused the jackalope's head to pop up. Its eyes widening in alarm. With a hop, it jumped out of the way of the guide's swing, and she trembled to the group in a heap. Blowing an errant strand of hair from her face, the guide scrambled to her hooves, gesturing angry at the fleeing creature. Don't let it get away! The chase. The jackalope had proven incredibly difficult to capture. The guide, had she any thoughts other than to first catch and then excruciatingly murder the creature that was so frustratingly avoiding her, would have noticed two factors that were leading the beast's slippery nature. First, the jackalope was fast, surprisingly so. The guide's contingent of equines of silver were barely able to do more than to keep pace with the creature, let alone the guide herself. The second factor was the jackalope's almost preternatural ability to sense when a strike was coming. It would have been impressive were it not absolutely infuriating. As it stood, the guide had little but murder on her mind, and the jackalope led them on a not-so-merry chase back to town. The jackalope took them back to the main thoroughfare in town, ducking and weaving through startled passers-by along the way. The less nimble guide and her entourage was forced to push their way through, biting out curses as they tried to clear the way. The guide, thoroughly enraged, spat out orders to the zebras around her. Flank left, down the alley. I want that thing Flank left, down the alley. I want that thing dead. Eventually, they cornered the beast. It sat at the end of an alleyway, quivering in fear, as the guide approached with an almost maniacal smile, knife and hoof. And it was all over. Obtained ingredient, ground up horns of Ponyville jackalope. The Everfree Forest. Place screams never go in there, which sounds like a perfect place one could find alchemical ingredients that I need. There's also something else. Something about this forest intrigues me so. The guidance gave me a sign. I felt presence only feel when a presence I only feel when I am among my zebra peers, coming from deep inside this cursed forest. What lies in there? Could it be another zebra? I suppose there's only one way to find out. I mean, if you watch this show, you know, yes, there is another zebra in there. Oh, what's her name? I don't remember her name. Darn it. But yes, there is another zebra in there. It's like the only zebra in the show. And definitely the only one that's reoccurring. But, you know, there is another zebra. Keep going, keep fighting. Hippogriffia, you're losing, so do better. Chiroptera, you're winning, so do just a little worse. I want you guys to tie, to hold each other, to neither of you be able to win. That's what I want here. The future of the nation. But Ma, we don't want to go away. It is what is required of you. You're going to become equines of gold. That's not an honor given to many children, but much less within the same family. But we'll never see you again. The children grasped at their mother's robes, desperately begging to not be sent away. She gently pushed them away, then knelt down to be at their eye level as she looked into her children's eye. The Star Father has asked us to do some different things. I know that going away to a special school is scary, but it's for the best. This is a school made for very special foals, much like yourselves. You're going to become the greatest zebras in the Ascendancy one day, you know? Despite her attempts at reassuring her children, they seemed hesitant. Their mother brought them in close for a hug, and it won't be forever. We will see each other again one day. I know it's going to be hard, but just because we'll be apart doesn't mean that I won't love you any less. Now go. It's time to begin your training to become equines of gold, just like me. As the children hesitantly left to join the caravan that would take them away, the mother steeled herself against her hidden tears. This was necessary. The Star Father wouldn't have done things this way unless it was for a good reason, she told herself. For the glory of equinity, the future must be taught away from their parents. Okay then. Sure, whatever. And there we go. The transcendental governance. It is not enough for only the justice system to reflect the social order of the ascendancy. The entire state must reflect the rightful order of things, with the equines of gold given the duty to oversee the administrate. The whole society must be mobilized to restore the godhead, and a strong state is needed to lead the ascendancy in this glorious mission. Okay, that's just doesn't have a description, sure, whatever. Into the forest. In the end, the guide had decided to enter the forest by herself. The residents of Ponyville, cowards one and all, had very little good to say about the Everfree Forest. It's haunted, one had told her. Nothing kind or good lives there. Everything the forest can and will try to hunt you, or worse. Needless to say, the guide had not gotten to where she was by listening to scared ponies. Having briefly scouted the outskirts of the forest, she had determined that the best course of action would be to just go it in alone. The rough, boggy terrain would be horrible on her more heavily armed equines of silver, and she'd be quick enough to get in and out as needed. It had all gone wrong rather quickly. The forest was dark, even during the day, and visibility was incredibly low. An errant branch had torn her bandolier, and a good portion of her potions had fallen to the ground. She watched helplessly as a mixture pooled on the ground, and the resulting explosion sent her tumbling off a cliff into the river below. Trying desperately to claw to the surface, she was forced to cut the tattered remains of her cloak. As it got tangled around her, she surfaced, grasping for her breath, and she swam to shore. She lay there panting and felt a shadow loom over her. Glancing up, she saw, was that a zebra? What is there? What is this that has washed on the shore? The strange zebra said, her voice taking an odd cadence. Someone new, or something more. Taking the proffered hoof, the guide followed the zebra to safety. Stranger in a strange land. The strange zebra had introduced herself as Zecora, in her own strange way of speaking, and had led the guide to a small hut in the middle of the Everfree Forest. It was undoubtedly the home of an alchemist. Zecora, yep, this is the zebra from the show, though the guide couldn't tell if she had been classically trained, or learned on her own. It has been some time, you see, Zecora began, her tone almost uncertain, since I've met someone from the old country. Tell me, stranger, from where do you hail? From what foreign port did you set sail? The guide took a moment to parse the word. Colthage, or the Ascendancy now. Strange rumors have come from there, Zecora hummed. Once a kind land, but no longer so fair. Tell me, stranger, be you a refugee? The zebra eyes grew hard, asserting. Of something else I suggest you flee. The guide shivered. Yes, I'm a refugee, she lied. Colthage, it's no longer what it used to be. The other zebra's eyes softened. I believe that I begin to see, though why have you become to Everfree? Regents, he admitted. I'm an alchemist, much like you. I'm an alchemist, much like you. A bog like this would be perfect for what I'm trying to do. But things didn't quite go as planned. She paused, feeling the whisper of the guidance in the corner of her mind. Actually, she asked haltingly, do you have enough to spare from your stocks? I think I've had enough adventures for one day. Zecora stared at her, assessing. Finally, Zeba nodded. Indeed, she said. Please take what you need. The guide pretended to look around, instead feeling the guidance direct her. She came to a stop in front of a nearly empty jar. What's in here? She asked. Sap from a tree within the bog and the Everfree. Obtained ingredients. Sap from a tree and within the bog of the Everfree to be used in the alchemical super projects. It is said that the Castle of the Two Sisters is a major equestrian historical site, yet it lays abandoned near the outskirts of the Everfree Forest. I personally find this perplexing, as you'd think it would be a major tourist attraction given the significant equestrian history. Nevertheless, I am drawn to it by the guidance. Perhaps I will learn why the ponies do not visit this place. But I think that's going to be a good time to go ahead and end this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. And as always, peace.